Hey everybody, what's up? Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems, joined by Marisa Inda. And today we're going to be talking to you about squat stance, foot width, and how you should decide upon your squat stance. Figuring out what's best for you, how to adjust it, through different phases of training, phases of life perhaps, and just going to help better inform your decision-making process about this seemingly simple but often controversial topic. So as always, videos here on the Juggernaut Training Systems channel are brought to you by the JuggernautAI app. So whether you squat with your feet right next to each other or out past the rack, JuggernautAI app is going to make a custom program for you to help you become the strongest version of yourself by looking at gender, age, height, weight, strength, experience, lifting style, high bar, low bar, all those kind of things, and design a totally custom program for you that adapts to your feedback. So you can check out the link down in our description or visit JuggernautAI.app for a 2-week free trial. All right, so squat stance. Right off the bat, controversial squatter.
Very.
Why do you choose to squat with such narrow stance?
Apparently, I don't want to be strong.
Yes, and you need a new coach, and you've never lifted before and don't know what you're doing. So assume the position. So Marisa's squat stance, right there, just barely outside of her hips, let's call it shoulder width. My regular squat stance, just outside of my hips, about shoulder width. You may notice we are different sized. We are not the same. Sometimes people confuse us and think, are you guys twins? But no, in fact, we are totally different size. Marisa is 5 feet, don't say 4'11 and a half, 115-ish pounds, size 2.5 shoes. The cutest little things. I am 6 foot, don't say 5'11 and a half, 300 something pounds depending on the day. Our stances are not really that far off relative to our body proportions. Your stance looks really narrow to the uninitiated internet commenter, and they're like, oh my God, your feet are so close together. Yes, but your hips are very narrow, so it all makes a lot more sense. I think 5-6 years ago when you were squatting like that and everyone was getting up in arms about it, and then half of the women of France decided to come along and copy your stance. I don't know, they probably came about it. Yeah, they probably came about it themselves anyways, and squatting some of the biggest weights for female powerlifters of all time. I think that probably changed some people's perspective on it. The gist of it is that narrow or west side wide, one's not really right or wrong as long as you're squatting well. You're squatting to legal depth, which is the crease of the hip below the top surface of the knee. That's the rule in every federation, by the way, and regardless of equipment. So while it's probably unlikely that someone with the west side wide squat stance is going to actually be able to hit legal depth, crease of the hip below the top surface of the knee, or someone who puts their feet totally together with their toes straight, you're going to be somewhere in between those. And the process of figuring out where you are is pretty simple. You just start squatting and you're like, ouch, ouch, this feels bad. Wow, this feels strong. That feels stronger than that. It's not an overly complicated process. If you're brand new to squatting, where should you start? We say to take the stance that you would for a vertical jump. Now edit that part in where I float up in the air. Where you would do a vertical jump from, and then you're going to do this sweet dance move. Heels out, toes out about 15 to 30 degrees. Make sure to get your protractor out, because it's 14 degrees, knee cancer. 31 degrees, knee bola. You're going to see great squatters who squat like this. That's fine. You're going to see some great squatters who squat like this. That's fine. You're probably somewhere in between those. So yeah, about 15 to 30 degrees out, that vertical jump, sweet dance move, way to find your stance, that's going to likely put you a little bit wider than hip width, assuming you've done a vertical jump before and you don't jump like this or like this kind of underneath your hips, heels out, toes out. Good starting point. If you squat down from here and you're like, hey, I hit depth, my knees don't hurt, my hips don't hurt, I feel powerful, great. You might not have to make very many adjustments. If you have great hip internal rotation, you can probably squat with your toes pointed a little bit more straight forward. If you have really poor hip internal rotation or great external rotation, I guess, Greg Knuckles, great lifter, squats with his toes pointed way out. Way out squat's gonna give you a little bit less forward to backward stability. Toe forward squat, gonna give you a little bit more of that stability, kind of a natural impingement almost of the hip, but that can create a lot of tension and maybe some increased strength out of the bottom. But again, neither of them is really right or wrong. But if you start squatting like this and you get blocked like me and you can't hit depth, or your ankles feel super tight, your knees start hurting, that's probably not the way for you. If you can't squat to legal depth and you're trying to compete in powerlifting, a squat that you can't hit depth with is not the squat for you. If you're doing this and you feel like your groin's about to rip in half, that's probably not the squat for you either. So it really is just as simple as experiment with it. You could do a quick test where you lay on your back and you pull your knee to your chest. Well, now that Shorty's switched from the gooch angle, which I was trying to give all the viewers a free show with, if I'm pulling my knee straight to my chest and that gets me to depth and I don't feel any like impingement in the hip, that's great. If you got to be a little bit wider to get to the proper depth, that's fine too. Again, one way is not right or wrong universally, it's what's best for you. These shorts are very tight through the crotch. So as we're talking about hip internal rotation and people who are trying to squat with their toes pointed very straight forward, which was really popular for a while, particularly in CrossFit and weightlifting communities. If you don't have great hip internal rotation, you're not gonna be able to squat comfortably like that. Your hips are gonna hurt, you're not gonna get as strong as you can. But if you wanna test and improve your hip internal rotation, simple way to do it, squeeze the foam roller between your knees, sit up tall, all right? And I'm just trying to internally rotate this hip by moving my foot out. You want to have balance between the two sides so that they're about equal. I have bad hip internal rotation on both sides. Should be able to go almost twice as far as I am here. But just doing this, holding it, trying to squeeze an extra degree or two out of it. Simple thing that you can do in your warm-up, simple thing you can do on your off days to address that hip internal rotation once it becomes pretty easy. I could have a band anchored across and resist that movement. You could do the 90-90 drill on the ground to improve hip internal rotation. Lots of ways to address it. It doesn't need to be, an hour a day. It can be like 10 reps a day. It's probably going to take you a minute and start improving that if you are really lacking in it, or if you're just so committed to squatting with your toes straighter, you need to have good hip internal rotation for that. And even if you don't squat like that, you want good hip internal rotation, because it's gonna happen sometimes when the lifts get real heavy and your technique breaks down a little bit. And if you are totally lacking there, probably gonna be in a little bit of pain. Not that one is right or wrong, it's really just what you feel comfortable and strong with. That, don't force yourself into, I have to squat with my toes straight because some book said it, or I have to squat with my feet really wide apart because I saw people lifting a lot of weights on the internet that way, especially if you don't understand the special diapers that they're wearing while they do that. You got to figure out what's right for you, and that's really just going to happen through experimentation. So I'd start, if you're brand new to it, start moderate jumping stance, heels out, toes out. You'll end up about shoulder width, feel comfortable from there. Same kind of thing with footwear. Your stance may change if you're squatting in flats versus heels. You might be able to go a little bit more toes straight if you have heeled shoes on. I had a great, I squatted 905 American record in the 308s class. This is in 2011, the early 20-aughts. That doesn't sound as bad as the late 1900s. But in 2011, and I did it in a stance about here, wider than what you've seen me do most of the time, and with my toes straighter. And it was a great squat, one of the best squats of my powerlifting career. My hip hurt for about 3 months after. So awesome for that day, but it wasn't gonna be a long-term sustainable thing for me. So once you found that stance that you feel comfortable and strong in, just stick with it and work on that, and then just keep putting more weight on the bar, do more reps, move heavier weights faster, and that's a great way to do it. Different squat stances though do have a role in your training. As you're farther away from competition, you want more variation. And variation can be found a lot of ways. You could spend tens of thousands of dollars. Apologies, there's a dogfighting ring going on out here. But that's not to say that different squat variations don't have a place in your training. As you're farther away from competition, you want more variation. You could get that variation by spending tens of thousands of dollars on different barbells, or I'll save you those tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe I'll put my Venmo down in the link, or just sign up for the JuggernautAI app to say thank you for this money-saving tips that I'm going to give you. You could get variation by moving your stance wider, moving your stance closer, putting the bar higher on your back, putting the bar lower on your back, putting the bar in front of your body, going down slower, pausing at different points in the lift. You're welcome for saving you tens of thousands of dollars on different barbells. All right. So the stance variations there, maybe in the wider stance, you feel weak because your adductors are weak, your glutes or hips aren't as strong. Then in a general phase of training, could be a hypertrophy phase, could be a bridge block type of thing, doing some wide stance squats is going to be a beneficial thing for you. If it is like painful to your hips at that toe angle, at that width, don't go quite that wide.
Stop it.
Turn your toes out a little bit more, in a little bit more. Experiment, even just during the warm-ups of that day, to find the one that feels okay for you. So having some variability there and training with different stances, your off stance that you're not as strong in, that's going to have some benefit to you long-term. Just don't be doing it in the weeks or month leading up to a meet. Keep that for farther away, more general periods of training, and allow you to develop that more well-rounded strength. You're going to stay healthier. You're going to be able to train harder, longer, and get stronger in the long run. Now, those stance variations can also have benefits if, let's say, you're a woman lifting while you're pregnant, all right? Or you're a man lifting while you're becoming of advanced size, and you need to, give it a little bit more room for your belly to sit between your legs. You might have to widen your stance out a little bit. That's going to be coming out of necessity. Don't feel like if you're going from a 220s class lifter to a 275s class lifter, you probably aren't going to have the identical technique that you had. Your body structure is changing. Your stance and technique needs to change to accommodate that. It might not be forever, but just for a season might be all that you need. Also, if you're dealing with injuries, knee pain, hip pain, back pain, and it's not enough where it's like, okay, I'm in full rehab mode, I'm going to physical therapy trying to deal with this, but today, as I'm warming up to squat, my hip's kind of bugging me. Well, is it still bugging you if you turn your toes out more, if you turn your toes straighter, if you make your stance a little bit wider, a little bit narrower? Give yourself the grace and the space to make those small adjustments throughout the course of training. Even just making small changes like that as you warm up, maybe it feels better and better and you get back to your normal stance, but it just took you a couple of sets to get into it. All totally fine. You don't have to be so rigid and only do this one competition stance all the time because of specificity. That's not what specificity is. All right, that's a very narrow understanding of it and one that's going to not help you succeed in the long run. So, in summary, your squat stance, the foot width, toe angle, it's really up to you to find out what feels good. Yeah, you can, test your hip mobility through just laying on your back and seeing where you get to depth the most comfortable way. Hip internal rotation, hip external rotation. We want them both. We need them both. Assess that, work on it, but don't force yourself into a technique that feels really uncomfortable to you or that you don't feel powerful in because you saw someone on Instagram or on YouTube or in a book do it, or that's how your favorite lifter squats, because chances are you're not built the same way as them. They just built different. And so you don't want to force yourself into that. And then the other stances, wider, narrower, different toe angles, those can have their place in your training as a variation. The more different it is than your competitive technique, put it farther away from competition and allow yourself to make small technical changes as maybe you're coming back from an injury, or just kind of trying to work around an injury. That could be for the day, that could be for the week, that could be for a block, that could be for several training blocks. And maybe that becomes your new stance because you just get better at it, or you go back to your other one. the changes between these are not so drastic that, if you're used to squatting like this, and then for a couple of weeks you squat like that you're gonna forget how to do it the other way. It's just not that complicated. So allow yourself to make those adjustments, do what feels comfortable, what feels strong. Don't just copy someone for the sake of copying them, or take advice, kind of this blanket boilerplate advice that there's a one-size-fits-all squat technique, because there's not. You can squat with your feet close, squat the biggest weights in the world. You could squat with your feet wide, squat the biggest weights in the world. A lot of different ways to approach it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to check out the JuggernautAI app 2-week free trial at juggernautai.app or at the link down in the description.